The apex of the Wolfpacks. In the winter of 1943, the Atlantic breathed with menace. Convoys stretched across the grey horizon like veins feeding a desperate island, and beneath them, the U-boats waited, silent, patient, and lethal. Every few nights, the sea erupted into a storm of explosions as torpedoes struck home. For the sailors aboard merchant ships, it felt as if the ocean itself had turned hostile. For the German submarine crews, it was triumph. This was the apex of the Wolfpacks. Admiral Dönitz, the architect of the U-boat strategy, had finally shaped his vision into reality, a living system of steel predators sweeping across Allied shipping lanes. Each submarine was no longer a lone hunter. Instead, dozens coordinated through encrypted radio messages, forming long patrol lines that stretched hundreds of miles. The first contact would shadow a convoy, call in reinforcements, and then, as night fell, they pounced together. 6, sometimes 10 boats striking at once. For the Allies, no amount of courage seemed enough. The Atlantic convoys were enormous, 40, 50, sometimes 70 merchant ships packed with fuel, food, and weapons. But against these synchronized attacks, they were fragile. The escorts were few, the skies often empty, and technology favored the hunters. Depth charges worked only when the target was submerged, and most U-boat attacks came from the surface, where radar was too crude to spot them. At night, they blended seamlessly into the dark. Every successful strike fed the illusion that the U-boat war was decided. Between January and March 1943, Allied shipping losses reached catastrophic levels. More than 500,000 tons went down in a single month. Britain's lifeline to North America frayed to its thinnest strand since the war began. Newspapers in Germany celebrated the Glücklich sein, the second happy time. The phrase echoed across propaganda reels. The Atlantic was conquered again. Inside the cramped pressure hulls, morale soared. Commanders swapped victory tallies over the intercom. 5 ships sunk, 6, sometimes entire convoys obliterated. Crews painted tonnage symbols on the sides of their conning towers like fighter aces marking kills. To them, the war was mathematical. More ships down meant fewer supplies reaching Britain, and fewer supplies meant collapse. Dönitz believed they were on the brink of that collapse. His headquarters tracked Allied losses through meticulous charts, the upward curves confirming everything he'd promised Hitler. The U-Bootswaff, once dismissed as a minor force, had become the pride of the Kriegsmarine. Every officer understood their place in Dönitz's system of tonnage warfare. Victory wasn't about battles won, but about numbers sunk. As long as the curve kept rising, Germany had hope. But statistics can lie. The tonnage chart didn't show the growing industrial might behind those sinking ships. It didn't reveal that, for every merchantman lost, 2 more were launching from American shipyards. It didn't show that the Allies were quietly closing the mid-Atlantic air gap with long-range patrols. To Dönitz, none of that mattered, yet. His Wolfpacks refined their choreography. Patrol lines stretched from Greenland to Biscay. Signal traffic pulsed between boats and command in Naval. A convoy sighted. Coordinates flashed across the Atlantic in coded bursts. Nearby subs received orders to converge. Within hours, they'd encircle the target. The first torpedo hit often caused panic, breaking formation, and scattering the escorts. That chaos was the Wolfpack's real weapon. For the British, it felt endless. Sailors gave names to U-boats they never saw, imagining them as sea monsters. Some convoys were reduced to flaming wreckage within sight of each other. Survivors spoke of hearing the laughter of German voices through the noise of the night, though whether anyone truly laughed out there is uncertain. Still, the illusion of invincibility hardened. Inside U-boat command, intelligence reports fed this confidence. The German code-breaking service, B-Dienst, had successfully penetrated certain Allied ciphers, giving early clues to routes. When U-boats found their prey exactly where expected, it seemed proof of German superiority in both courage and cunning. Few suspected that this success rested on fragile luck, nor that the Allies were already dismantling it with faster, more complex encryptions and silent deception. For now, victory looked absolute. Dönitz himself predicted Britain could be starved out before summer if the current trend continued. He ordered accelerated production of new type VII and IX submarines and pushed crews to sea faster than they could be trained. Factories worked beyond capacity. recruit schools shortened courses. 16-year-olds volunteered, dreaming of glory under the waves. They didn't know that by signing their names, many were pledging to vanish without trace. Each night at sea, the men inside the boats followed a ritual, a brief transmission home, coded in Enigma, reporting kills and fuel levels. They believed they were whispering to a secure command post, unseen and untouchable. But every transmission also betrayed an approximate position to Allied direction-finding stations along Britain's coast. The very coordination that made the Wolfpacks deadly was also weaving the net that would soon close around them. Still, in these first months of 1943, the myth held strong. The U-boat seemed to own the Atlantic. In Berlin, officers pinned new medals to crisp uniforms. Propaganda films showed submarines surfacing in sunlight, crews smiling atop conning towers. The image played beautifully on newsreels, but hid the truth, the exhaustion, the uncertainty, and the growing number of boats that simply didn't come back. There were quiet warnings even then. A veteran commander noted in his log that enemy aircraft were appearing more frequently farther out to sea. Another mentioned strange radar pings they couldn't trace. Reports trickled upward but were buried under triumphant communiques. The leadership saw anomalies, not patterns. Success left no room for doubt. The Atlantic, however, had begun to change character. With each sinking, Allied scientists, tacticians, and codebreakers learned more. Operations researchers charted the mathematics of convoy geometry. Engineers in Britain and America built compact radar sets capable of piercing weather and darkness. While U-boat crews reveled in their victories, their adversaries were quietly rewriting the rules. But the Wolfpack commanders didn't see that. From inside their steel vessels, they only saw the explosions, the burning ships, and the glory that followed. Their confidence became doctrine, and their doctrine became blindness. What they thought was dominance was already turning hollow, a momentary peak before the fall. In early 1943, the hunters still believed the ocean belonged to them. Dönitz called it the decisive phase. His captains toasted to final victory aboard boats that smelled of oil and sweat, unaware that the next patrols would bring the deadline of their glory. Beneath the waves, triumph drifted toward tragedy. The Wolfpacks had reached their height, and unknowingly, the summit from which they'd begin their descent. The hidden weakness in German intelligence. Inside a dimly lit bunker in Paris, operators from the German Naval Intelligence Service, Dienst, hunched over receivers, headphones pressed tight, pencils scribbling in rhythm with bursts of Morse. The intercept room pulsed with static. Somewhere in that noise lay the coordinates of Allied Convoy, lifelines that, if detected early enough, could be shattered by Dönitz's Wolfpacks. For months, Dienst had been hitting gold. They'd cracked sections of the British naval cipher number 3, deciphering fragments of convoy routes with eerie accuracy. When their decoded messages aligned with U-boat sightings at sea, the system looked flawless. Commanders called it their invisible advantage. To Dönitz, intelligence wasn't support, it was weaponry. He believed raw courage alone could never win under the Atlantic's miles deep uncertainty. Success required precision, and precision meant information. Every new decrypt from Dienst fed into the rhythm of his war map. Patrol lines shifted, submarines redirected, convoys predicted days before first contact. During early 1943, it felt near mathematical. Find the broadcast, decode the pattern, dispatch the pack, sink the tonnage. Germany appeared to be mastering the unseen layer of war. But this mastery carried a flaw buried deep within its logic. German analysts saw code-breaking as a one-way mirror. They believed they could watch the enemy without being watched themselves. That illusion would poison their judgment. As they triumphed in the cipher rooms, the Allies were learning just as fast, even faster, to pierce German communications. The secrecy Dienst relied on was already an illusion. Still, inside German Naval Command, confidence hardened into arrogance. Reports from U-boat captains confirmed what the decrypts predicted. Convoys appeared right where intelligence said they'd be. Cargo manifests turned out accurate. Every match felt like validation. No one asked how long such luck could last, or whether the enemy noticed. The statistical success gave Dönitz a dangerous conviction. If German cryptanalysts could read the British, then the British surely couldn't read them. By mid-1942, B. Dienst had grown bold. They were reading variations of American and British codes used for transatlantic convoys, sometimes within hours of transmission. The payoff was devastating. Merchant losses spiked, and Dönitz used those numbers to argue for expanded submarine production. But information has a half-life in war. Allied cipher officers, aware their messages were being intercepted, began rotating fresh codebooks faster than German analysts could adjust. New encryption tables appeared, message formats subtly changed. What looked like another routine radio intercept became gibberish overnight. The shift was quiet, deliberate. The Allies didn't advertise the change, so from the German perspective, nothing was wrong. Convoy data grew inconsistent, but analysts blamed meteorological interference or late intercepts, not encryption shifts. In intelligence rooms from Paris to Kiel, technicians spent sleepless nights trying to tune receivers that no longer delivered clarity. Dönitz didn't notice the drift. His graph still favored optimism, the early gains still disguising the fault lines forming beneath them. Meanwhile, Allied deception worked in silence. Clerks inserted small errors into dummy radio traffic, false conv, departures, misleading routing points. B. Dienst devoured the bait. Whole wolfpacks chased ghost formations across empty stretches of the Atlantic. Submarines burned precious fuel-shadowing ships that didn't exist. Captains blamed faulty weather predictions. B. Dienst blamed weak signals. Few realized the truth. They were now reading what the enemy wanted them to read. Inside the U-boats, the cracks showed differently. Patrols ended in empty water. Promised convoys never materialized. Captains filed cautious signals. Visibility poor, position uncertain, no contact after 72 hours. At headquarters, officers dismissed them. They argued that losses at sea were proof the strategy still worked, proof delivered by men already disappearing beneath the waves. Intelligence became self-referential, feeding only its own certainty. By early 1943, the divergence became critical. The Allies were drawing not from guesswork, but from ultra, decoded Enigma traffic that gave them full view of U-boat directives. Every movement Dönitz ordered, every regrouping of his patrol lines, echoed through Allied command rooms in near real time. Yet Dönitz interpreted operational failures as random misfortune. When wolfpacks arrived too late or steamrolled into ambushes, he accused his captains of error. Morale dipped. Some officers suspected that the Allies had found a way into Enigma, but suggesting it bordered on treason. To question the machine was to question the doctrine itself. The result was tragic irony. German intelligence had achieved remarkable technical skill, but failed at strategic humility. Instead of testing whether their success could be an illusion, they doubled down. When the Allies upgraded their codes and encryption, especially the US Navy's shift to more complex ciphers, B. Dienst's decrypt rates plummeted, but internal reports massaged the data to preserve appearances. Dönitz received summaries promising continued partial access, unaware that the channel was closing for good. At the same moment, German signal security was unraveling. The same open frequencies used for daily U-boat reports gave Allied direction finding stations precise bearings. Every message sent in triumph became a trail marker for British intercept teams. By trusting their own communications network so completely, the Germans had gifted the Allies a map of their movements. But to Dönitz and his staff, radio discipline symbolized control. They couldn't imagine adopting Allied-style compartmentalization because it clashed with the philosophy of centralized command that made wolfpacks possible. The efficiency of coordination masked its cost in exposure. The intelligence duel that once seemed evenly matched was tipping. After spring 1943, German decrypts dwindled to scraps, isolated meteorological data, outdated ship signals, nothing operationally useful. Yet B. Dienst continued delivering optimistic reports couched in jargon. Field commanders, desperate for usable information, filled the gaps with guesswork, sending submarines into increasingly predictable patrol routes. Those routes became ambush corridors for Allied aircraft, primed by ultra-intelligence. Inside the intelligence offices, the tone shifted. What had been frantic precision turned bureaucratic. Reports repeated patterns, rewritten from old templates. The most devastating realization, the possibility that the Allies now understood German communications better than Germany did the Allies, remained unspoken. It was easier not to see. Still, a few officers sensed collapse. They noted how quickly Allied escorts anticipated attacks, how convoys now altered courses before detection, how supply submarines, vital lifelines for distant patrols, were vanishing. They warned that the Code War might have reversed direction entirely. Their memos reached Dönitz's staff and stopped there, admitting that would mean admitting the entire operational model was compromised. So German intelligence carried on, hollowed by its own assumptions. Each interception, once celebrated, now mirrored back confusion. Each decrypt took longer, produced less, explained nothing. In Berlin, senior officials praised the service for its continuing contribution to victory, even as convoys crossed the Atlantic nearly unmolested. That was the hidden weakness, not incompetence, but faith. Faith that early mastery would stay permanent. Faith that the enemy couldn't innovate faster. Faith that technology, once conquered, stayed obedient. In truth, the Germans were surrounded by information they couldn't see, outsmarted by an enemy they believed inferior. V. Dienst's last real success had expired months before Dönitz realized he was fighting blind. The Wolfpack still prowled, but now they hunted from memory, chasing messages that no longer revealed their prey. And above them, unseen, Allied intelligence was already plotting their endings, each transmission traced, each intercept repaid. The illusion of German omniscience had finally inverted. The Watchers had become the watched. The invisible war of codes and signals. In a quiet building tucked behind Cambridge's stone walls, night never truly ended. The rooms at Bletchley Park glowed with the steady pulse of lamps, the scrape of pencils, and the soft clatter of typewriters set against the hiss of intercepted radio static. Hundreds of analysts, linguists, mathematicians, chess champions, worked in silence and secrecy. To them, the war wasn't being fought with torpedoes or bombs, but with electrically powered words. Each sequence of letters streaming across their cipher machines was a shot fired in a different kind of battle, one that no U-boat crew could see coming. By 1942, the Germans believed their communications were unbreakable. The Enigma machine had layered encryptions, changing daily, even hourly. But at Bletchley, a network of minds driven by pure obsession turned that illusion of invulnerability into their opportunity. The British called their prize Ultra. It wasn't simply a set of decrypts, it was foresight, a map of the underwater war drawn in invisible ink. Every time a U-boat sent its routine report back to command, fuel levels, patrol positions, convoy sightings, that signal became another thread Bletchley's analysts could untangle. The effect was immediate and devastating. Convoy routes once plotted by guesswork now shifted according to intelligence that seemed prophetic. If Dönitz's Wolfpacks gathered near an expected shipping lane, Allied headquarters quietly rerouted the convoy hundreds of miles off course. By the time the U-boats reached their intended ambush point, they found only open ocean. The crews, sealed in their hulls, thought fate had turned fickle. They didn't realize the enemy was reading their mail. Radio networks made it all possible, and that's where the cruel irony lived. The same elaborate communications web that allowed Dönitz to coordinate submarines across thousands of miles also exposed them. Each burst of Morse sent across the ether leaked more than data. Direction finding teams along the British coast triangulated those signals within minutes, plotting on expansive maps spread under red lights in tracking rooms. Pinpoints appeared, then converged into trails tracing every U-boat patrol. From this information, Allied planners could chart entire Wolfpack formations before they struck. Hunter-killer groups sailed for intercept points long before the submarines reached them. For the Germans, what appeared to be a stroke of bad luck, the sudden arrival of aircraft or escorts at random times, was nothing of the sort. Ultra had turned the ocean transparent. Yet the brilliance of Bletchley Park wasn't only in decoding, it was in discretion. The greatest danger was revealing what they knew. Convoys could not be diverted too perfectly, or else the Germans would suspect a leak. Analysts and admirals navigated a delicate balancing act, using intelligence enough to save lives without exposing its existence. Every decision carried human weight, when to act and risk the secret, or when to stay silent and let ships sail into danger. Strategy became morality measured in tonnage. Meanwhile, U-Boat Command trusted its network absolutely. Messages pulsed back and forth daily, two-way conversations between Dönitz's headquarters and captains beneath the waves. They congratulated successes, instructed repairs, even reassigned patrol grids mid-mission. Those radio bursts often lasted several minutes, an eternity for a direction finding antenna to lock in. The Germans believed brevity codes and encryption protected them. They didn't realize each signal was a flare revealing their position. By 1943, British monitoring stations had refined the technique to ruthless precision. When a U-boat transmitted, analysts measured time of arrival differences between multiple coastal antennas. Within moments, the convergence produced an estimated fix, sometimes within 20 miles. When several messages followed in quick succession, the track sharpened. Combine that with ultra-decrypts of Dönitz's orders, and Allied strategists could predict not only where a submarine was, but where it intended to go. In essence, Dönitz was commanding from a glass room. He played his chessboard with confidence, never realizing his opponent could see every move. Each new operational order decrypted by Bletchley was telegraphed silently to the Admiralty's Western Approaches Command. From there, signals reached escort vessels instructing them to turn 20 degrees west or alter course to grid square M52. The sailors on deck followed without explanation, never told they were steering around an unseen ambush line. Under the surface, U-boats slid through empty currents, chasing echoes. The psychological toll on the German crews deepened. Patrol after patrol came back empty, fuel nearly gone, torpedoes unfired. Captains accused themselves of incompetence. Dönitz blamed weather, ocean currents, mechanical failures, anything but an intelligence failure. It seemed inconceivable that their proud encryption system, the very heart of their war, could be compromised. Pride became the slow poison that kept them blind. Inside Bletchley, the work never slowed. Messages streamed in 24 hours a day from listening posts chained across the Atlantic, Canada, Iceland, Gibraltar. The data fed back into Hut 4, where analysts sorted naval traffic. Out of endless pages of code groups, they extracted patterns, repeated coordinates, timing rhythms, circuit references. Piece by piece, they reconstructed Hitler's underwater fleet without ever leaving their desks. Every word that traveled through German radio space added another tile to the mosaic. And yet the British still took losses. Intelligence could reroute convoys, but it couldn't always protect ships caught in the open. Sometimes, Ultra came too late. Sometimes, commanders doubted its accuracy. The analysts felt the weight of those mistakes. They worked knowing that a missed intercept could mean hundreds of lives sunk in the dark before dawn. When the reports of new sinkings arrived, the cryptographers read them differently, from guilt rather than shock. But each failure sharpened the system, making the next convoy safer. Across the front lines, the invisible war of messages defined every movement. What Dönitz saw as instinct and discipline was, in reality, reaction to an opponent who already knew the answers. His wolfpacks kept reassembling into freshly compromised formations, unaware they were performing routines choreographed by their enemies. The tighter his command network became, the clearer it appeared on Allied charts. By spring 1943, ultra-intelligence guided not only convoys but offensive operations. Hunter-killer groups patrolled suspected rendezvous zones, targeting supply submarines, the milch cows that refueled and rearmed U-boats mid-ocean. Without them, distant patrols starved of fuel and were forced home, cutting Germany's reach in half. Each successful strike shrank the Wolfpack's footprint. For the men at sea, none of this had visible form. They felt only that something terrifying had changed. Captains' logs described phantom awareness, the sense of being followed though no ship could be seen. Radios grew quiet, orders shortened, signal discipline tightened out of fear. Still, it made no difference. The Allies didn't need more messages. They already knew enough. The tide of secrecy had reversed completely. German command believed they operated through secure lightning. Instead, their every spark was captured and mirrored. The architecture of their own coordination had become a weapon against them. Every victory at sea, every daring interception, was guided by a world of machines, mathematicians, and clerks working beyond the sound of gunfire. While Dönitz mapped his ocean in squares labeled with letters and numbers, the Allies were redrawing it in code chains and radio bearings. For all his brilliance, he was now an open book being read one page ahead. The Wolfpack still lurked beneath the waves, but the battlefield had expanded beyond their depth. Their torpedoes couldn't reach the cipher rooms or the flickering cathode screens of radar operators. There, the war was already decided. The hunters, still confident in their steel, were now pursuing phantoms shaped by their own messages. The Atlantic had turned into an echo chamber where every word bounced back with deadly accuracy. And in that quiet triumph of logic over secrecy, the seeds of the U-boat empire's destruction took root, not with explosions or heroics, but with sentences, keys, and signals whispered across the void. Sky against sea,